Welcome to episode 047 of the Bit Beacon Broadcast. It's August 12th, 2024, and Kodax, that's me. I'm here, flying solo again, but not to fret. I've got a nice slate of a show to talk about with you today. First up, I'll just briefly kind of mention I'm still playing Monster Hunter Stories. Like I mentioned last week, I didn't have a lot of time to play much of anything, so I only dabbled in it maybe 3 or 4 hours this past week, but I am kind of making progress through the game. I've gotten to the first big city. I've made it out of the snow area, and I'm in this sort of Japanese cherry blossom area. I can't remember the name of the city. I think it starts with a G, and so it's kind of opening up the story, meeting new characters. I can't remember. Oh, I got sent off to kill some monster at a beach, a royal Ludroth. So that's what I'm up to there. I did find an egg for a Diablos, which is a really nasty monster from the world of Monster Hunter. And it actually won't let me use the monster in my party yet, because I think it's telling me I basically need to rank up or something like that to another level, or my kinship stone, which allows me to partner uniquely with the monsters. So I'm kind of gated from using that monster right now, which I thought was kind of annoying. I was like, if you can let me find it, why don't you let me use it? I don't understand why, I can't put it in my party yet, but whatever. I guess it must just be too powerful to use at this point in the game. So that's what's going on there. I did have a pickup this past week. I got a copy of Sonic Superstars for Nintendo Switch. This is last year's kind of new Sonic game. It's a 2D style Sonic game. I think it mixes in some remaxed classic Sonic stages with new stages as well. On the back of the cover, I'll read the description. Journey to the mystical North Star Islands in this all-new take on classic 2D Sonic high-speed action platforming. Play as Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles and Amy and harness all new Emerald powers to stop Dr. Eggman, Fang, and mysterious new adversary Trip from converting the island's giant animals into badniks before it's too late. So yeah, this is a 2D Sonic made completely with 3D art and graphics. So it kind of has more of a modern look, I guess, that maybe Sega thinks appeals to more and more gamers, more so than making a 2D Sonic game with 2D artwork. Which, whatever it takes to keep Sonic alive. Not that he had much trouble, but I guess Sonic Mania, for all its success, and Sega doesn't really want to dabble in making another 2D Sonic, and they want to do 2D 3D instead. But it's better to have 2D Sonic even if it's in 3D than not have any 2D Sonic at all, in my opinion. So last week I talked about GameInformer ending its 30 some odd year legacy, and that their last issue was going to be issue 367, which was the Dragon Age Dawnguard issue with Dawnguard on the cover. Well, it turns out I was wrong. Apparently GameStop had already sent out the next issue of the magazine to everyone in the mail who had a subscription. And it's funny because my subscription was refunded to me and they only deducted $6 from it, which would have meant that I had received 3 issues. So I guess this last issue is just kind of a bonus freebie issue, which I guess that's fairly generous considering this is GameStop we're talking about. Now, while this is the final issue of Game Informer, issue 368, it features the casting of Frank Stone, which is a game from the universe of Dead by Daylight. This kind of, from the cover, it looks like almost like it has like a Telltale Games kind of look to it. I haven't really heard of this game until now. So I'm actually going to dive into this issue to explore what this game exactly is. So while this is the actual last issue of Game Informer, it still doesn't have any like commemorating of the magazine or anything. I guess production on this magazine just ended weeks ago before the staff knew that they were being let go. So when they said that they were 70% done on the following issue, which would have been 369, which also would have been another issue that wouldn't really have had anything to do with the end of Game Informer. So still, not quite the end that Game Informer, should get, but it's nice to see that one more issue was released. So 368 is officially the last Game Informer. And we have a little more Game Informer news coming up, but before we get there, I wanted to talk about an event I was at this past weekend. And this was the Yacht Club Games Shovel Knight 10th anniversary panel that was held at Giant Robot in Los Angeles off of Sawtelle Boulevard, I think is what it's called. So I had drove out there about 40 minutes or so before the panel began because I wasn't really sure what to expect. I had never been to Giant Robot before. Actually, while I was looking on Google Maps, I saw that the Yacht Club Games office is really close by to Giant Robot, so it makes sense why they chose to work with them to host their event there. And so I get to Giant Robot a little early, and it's a very small venue. They put out a couple, maybe 8 benches, I would say, and each bench seats 2 people. And then they had some chairs in the back. I'd say there's a max capacity of 20 some odd people. So I was able to get a seat on one of the benches fairly up close. I didn't want to be in the front row because it felt very close to where the panelists were seated. Speaking of the panelists, Sean Velasco, the founder of Yacht Club Games and director of Shovel Knight, Nick Wozniak, who is like 2D art lead, and I think he's just art lead for the studio, as well as on Shovel Knight. We had David D'Angelo, who I think is the lead programmer at Yacht Club Games and also on Shovel Knight. And then we had the legendary composer of Shantae Games, Shovel Knight, and a whole plethora of things, Jake Kaufman, aka Vert. I was truly shocked that Vert was there. I have not seen or heard anything from this guy in so many years, be it online or anything. He used to like go do like events and all kinds of different things. So anyways, yeah, kind of crazy that he was there. I wish I had known. I would have brought like Shantae Games with me and other projects. I forgot that all 4 of these guys, I believe, worked on Double Dragon Neon, which was released, I think, on the PS3, but it recently got a port to Switch and maybe PS4 a couple years ago. So yeah, I forgot to bring that with me too. But I did bring my PS4 copy of Shovel Knight, which I recently got, and I did get all 4 of them to sign it. I also got, I brought one of my drawing boards, and Sean drew his kind of janky version of Shovel Knight. I don't think he's known particularly for being an artist, but it still looked pretty cool. And then Nick Wozniak, the art lead for Yacht Club, he drew Spectre Knight, and he kind of did it in a way where he sort of integrated it into Sean's drawing, and so it's kind of like Spectre Knight's going in for the kill on Shovel Knight, which is pretty cool. So as for the actual panel itself, I would say it's one of the more entertaining and funny panels that I've been to. The 4 of them, you can tell, are all really close, tight-knit friends. and they were just really having a good time, kind of taking us through 10 years of Shovel Knight development on the main game, all the free campaign expansions that they added where you could play as other characters, and then through some of the sort of spin-off titles like Shovel Knight Dig and then Pocket Dungeon. And then they kind of teased a little bit about Mina the Hollower, which is their next big game they're working on. And then at the very end, they were like, yeah, we're making, some kind of a sequel to Shovel Knight. So a new big Shovel Knight project is in development. But yeah, really enjoyable. Highly interesting. A lot of cool insight behind the scenes. They definitely showed off some cool like concept artwork and things that had never been seen before. I got some pictures, but the way they were displaying it was kind of janky, so not the greatest pictures, especially with the angle I was kind of sitting at, and it was super bright inside the studio, and they just had it being projected onto the wall. But evidence that did happen. I would love for them to do another one of these, especially if Jake is there again. I got more games I'd love to get them to sign, but hey, I should have prepared a little better for this one, but I'm glad I at least got Shovel Knight signed by all of them, because they're probably four of the kind of key early people that worked at the studio back when it was literally being run out of Sean's apartment when they launched the Kickstarter all those years ago. Okay, so why don't we jump into our first story, which goes back to GameStop and GameInformer. So after last week's closure announcement, which if you remember, I read like some very generic kind of statement that was supposedly from GameInformer, except it wasn't. It was just some drafted by some corporate guy, who knows who, and just posted on the Twitter account as if it came from the GameInformer like staff or something. But no, it wasn't editor-in-chief of GameInformer Matt Miller. It was just some corporate thing. But something happened. A former GameInformer staffer still had access to the GameInformer Twitter account. So this unnamed person logged into the GameInformer Twitter account and posted the following message. Our 33-year-long legacy deserves a genuine goodbye, written by a former GameInformer member. We're heartbroken by the shutdown of our publication, yet we leave with pride knowing we poured everything we had into it. In the words of our editor-in-chief, be well, play well. The post then had 2 images attached, which listed all of the current GameInformer staff and their roles at the time of the closure. This post was not at all incendiary, didn't even mention GameStop, but what do you guys think Ryan Cohen's GameStop did? How do you think they reacted? Well, they nuked it, and I'm not talking about the post. I'm talking about the entire GameInformer Twitter account. It just vanished. It's gone. Nothing is there. All the pieces of original content, the tweets, the jokes, any videos they posted, any photos they posted, all gone. Just done. That sounds like how a baby would react when, their friend takes, their little toy from them. They go over to their friend's toys and they, kick their Lego buildings down and destroy it, It's just like, come on, guys. Why did that need to be done? If this is what they're doing to the Twitter account, what do you think GameInformer is going to do to their YouTube, any other social media pages? It's got to be just a matter of time before GameInformer is like, yeah, we better take those down too, in case some former staffer goes rogue again. So what about the YouTube channel, which has thousands upon thousands of hours of original content, developer interviews, studio tours, and behind the scene looks into what it's like on the day-to-day life making games and being in the studio. So there's actually currently a preservation effort underway to download all of GameInformer's video content by the Min Max group. If you've never heard of MinMax, they're a bunch of former GameInformer staffers who split off in 2019 to form sort of their own online outlet. Some of them probably saw the writing on the wall back then that it was only a matter of time. And some of them were actually staff who were let go from GameInformer that year. So between, those kinds of people merging, coming together, a new effort was formed in the form of MinMax. And MinMax, it would make sense. They would want to have GameInformer videos and content preserved as best they could. So hopefully, I haven't looked at, but last I heard, the GameInformer YouTube account was still up and running. So I hope that the MinMax crew has been able to fully back up everything by this point. Before we move on to our second story, and I've got 3 today for y'all, let's talk about a shirt I've got in my collection here. So this is, again, I'll describe it to you because you can't see it, is a black crew neck shirt. It's probably a large because I was at the time a little bit bigger. This is the official t-shirt for BlizzCon 2011. On the front of the shirt, it has a white Blizz logo, and then it has like in the Blizzard font, and then below it says Con, and then in the O it has 2 1s for 2011. And so yeah, that's kind of that. And then on the back, it has the key art for BlizzCon 2011, which features the kind of feminine Diablo from Diablo 3. It features Thrall, it looks like, from Warcraft, and then Kerrigan from StarCraft 2. I think Diablo 3 was just coming out at this time, 2011. I think this was the last BlizzCon that I personally attended. This was the year that the Foo Fighters actually performed at BlizzCon. And funny story, my brother's birthday is in October, and we used to go to BlizzCon together every year that they held it. But for whatever reason that year, he wasn't able to afford his own ticket. And we couldn't scrounge enough together to go. So I only went to BlizzCon on the first day, and on the second day when the Foo Fighters were performing, I gave my brother my ticket so he could go see the Foo Fighters, kind of as a birthday gift to him. And not that I regret it or anything, but man, I kind of feel like I missed out not seeing the Foo Fighters there. That was the year that their new album came out. Well, then new album came out, Wasting Light, which is like, I'm not like a mega Foo Fighters guy, but I adore that album. I think from beginning till end, it's super solid, and there's a lot of great songs on it. Like, I don't skip anything on that album. And I recently just had kind of a sudden random opportunity to go see the Foo Fighters down in San Diego, which I'm really grateful for. Thank you to Phil, you know who you are. It was really enjoyable. Kind of fulfilled that sort of missed opportunity I had all those years ago. BlizzCon 2011. I believe this was the year that maybe Mist of Pandaria was being demoed at the show, which was the next World of Warcraft expansion after Cataclysm. Again, my WoW is kind of rusty after Cataclysm, so I'm not totally sure what happened there. But my last BlizzCon, it's kind of a bummer to be by myself because we used to go with like a big group of friends, so kind of an anticlimactic one for me. Okay, let's talk our next story. For 20 years, RomHackingDotNet has been the premier host of video game hacks. So these hacks include language translations for games that were never localized outside of Japan, bug fixes for games with glitches and other errors, minor enhancements to games to address player criticism, and hacks that go so far as to essentially create a completely new game or add significant content to older games, typically. Um, I've personally been using RHDN, RomHackingDotNet, off and on over the last decade, mostly to download language patches for like Japanese DS and Game Boy and Game Boy Advance games. But most recently, and I was talking about this a few months ago, I've been kind of playing Shin. I've been playing Shin Pokemon Red, not super frequently, or not super recently, I should say, but I'm still in the middle of a playthrough of that. This is a ROM hack that adds new features to Red and Blue versions, such as giving the game like a hard mode, trainers, and wild Pokemon that scale with the player, gym leader rematches. In fact, you can rematch any trainer in the game that you want. And then also better move distribution, so certain Pokemon can like learn moves that they normally maybe couldn't in Gen 1, but maybe future games would allow them to learn those moves. So that way there's some Pokemon, I don't have a great example off the top of my head, that kind of sucked, only because they never learned anything past Bubble. Like they never got Bubble Beam or Ice Beam or something like that. And now with this hack, it kind of gives them access to those moves, as they rightfully should have access to them, and as they did in later games, to make them more competitive and usable in the early games. Because the early games, ultimately, players always kind of just went to the same 10, 15 Pokemon, for use in battles, because most Pokemon were just, given horrible movesets. It's like there wasn't a lot of thought put into that. Like the game must have been about to come out, and the programmers at Game Freak must have been like, okay, he can learn a water move, this one can do this one can do that, but then didn't think to give them access to anything, a little more meaty. So for me, ROM hacks can breathe life into old games. They can make, games that I never thought I had access to. Another example is Monolith Soft, the creators of the Xenoblade series, Xenosaga, Xenogears. They had a DS game come out called Somabringer, which was unfortunately never localized in the Americas. It was only a Japan release, but a group of fans got together, translated the game, and released this hack patch. And so to be clear, when I say they're hacking games, what do I mean here? RomHackingDotNet doesn't actually distribute any game files. The website acts as a distribution platform for creators to upload their ROM hacked patches, which then users need to apply to a ROM or an ISO file for the game that they own somehow. So, people can dump their own ROMs or dump their own ISOs using various different tools. Or what most people probably do is they probably find, some shady website that lets you download, the ROM for whatever game, you want to play. Although, it can be getting harder and harder to kind of source some of these websites, especially as people like Nintendo kind of get real litigious and try to shut these places down. So when the news first broke, a lot of people thought RomHackingNet was winding down due to Nintendo, maybe throwing some lawsuit their direction or something. But Nintendo actually has nothing to do with this shutdown. Website admin Nightcrawler said the following in this announcement, which I've kind of tried to edit down a little bit. But bear with me here, this is kind of long, but I think we should get into it. So Nightcrawler says, it's been a good near 20-year run, but for various reasons it's time to wind things down. We joined hacking and translation communities together for the first time ever. We outlasted and eclipsed ROM hacking sites that came before us. We brought ROM hacking from niche and fragmented to global and centralized. We assembled the largest force of ROM hackers on the planet. We brought learning resources and accessibility to a much wider range of people. We made major progress legitimizing and pulling ROM hacking from underground dark web type material to something much more accepted by the mainstream. We paved a much easier path for all those that will come after us. No doubt, this site changed ROM hacking forever. It will leave behind the legacy of those accomplishments to remember. Having gone from an unknown fledgling site to an infinitely growing and globally known one made sustainability very challenging. The site became so busy with 24/7 use, endless queues, and endless inbox. It's a very different world than it was in 2005. Copyright pressures increased dramatically with takedowns and legal burden. The site shifted from serving mostly contributing humans to bots and overzealous people abusing resources. They drowned everybody else out. The need for the site has lessened over time. There are now many options for community discussions and open source projects and file storage across the internet. For a while, I was looking to find a successor within the circle of site supporters. I asked several potential people, but the stars did not align. I was finally looking to wind things down at the end of last year. I wanted to provide the site database and file archive to the general public. At that time, an internal group suddenly emerged with an offer to help continue the site. I questioned their intentions, but I thought it could prove to be a more community-friendly path forward. However, it turned out to be the opposite. We had a rocky Phase 1, moving the downloads into their possession. When I went to start at Phase 2, I discovered a most dishonest and hate-filled group. I learned that I had been dehumanized for a very long time. My personal details had been given out. Secret, deceitful plots had been made to cut me out and drop a bomb like I am a target to destroy. My family has seen this, and after discussion, we are immediately ceasing all related site operations. We are cutting ties to Discord and Twitter social media outlets. We will have no further contact with these individuals. Lines were crossed. This behavior is not okay for handling disagreements, miscommunication, anger, or anything else. And that's all Nightcrawler had to say. So what happens to RomHackingDotNet? Well, right now it's in kind of what he's calling a news-only format, where they will post almost like as a blog about like new ROM hacking developments, and I guess other places you can find these ROM hacks now, but they won't be hosted by RomHackingDotNet any longer. That being said, everything that was already on RomHackingDotNet remains available for download. The entire site and all of every ROM hack uploaded to the site was also shared with the Internet Archive, and you can download a 12 gigabyte file that contains every ROM hack that was active on RomHackingDotNet up until that day. So, what about this supposed group that dehumanized Nightcrawler? He said an awful lot of strange things in that last paragraph. So one of those people, Gideon Z, issued the following response on Twitter. By now you've probably seen that RomHackingDotNet is effectively dead. In the end, it's probably for the best. The site was built in the mid-aughts, and its back-end hadn't been re-engineered ever. Consequently, it was costing its administrator hundreds of dollars a month. Nightcrawler, the admin, was burnt out, and I sympathize. I'm burnt out too. But he existed as a single point of failure for the site and exerted iron-fisted control over community-created content and categorically refused basically all offers of help over the last decade. Remember all those times the site went down and stayed down for days at a time? It's because nobody had Nightcrawler's contact information. Only he could bring the site back up. And whenever anyone pointed out that the situation was less than ideal, they were rebuffed. In December of 2023, Nightcrawler posted about an imminent shutdown. Staff offered to help. It was initially refused. The site was just going to be turned off, no archive, no handoff, nothing. 20 years of community contributions just gone. Nightcrawler claimed to want a successor to build a new site, but his requirements were unrealistic by any measure. Said successor would have needed to have passion for the hobby, have donated to the site in the past several years, and the technical how to actually administer an archival platform of RHDN size. A real unicorn. Of course, none presented themselves, and no effort was ever actually made to seek one out. This is where things get a little technical. Kind of a lot of server talk. I'll try to brush over some of this if I can. After a lengthy negotiation, Nightcrawler eventually acquiesced to handing off the data crystal and to swapping out the file-serving backend with an S3 bucket as an initial transition step while a replacement could be built. It helped relieve the cost burden. It took a lot of convincing, and I don't think he really understood that S3 was way more cost-effective than the way files were currently being served. At one point he posted, "Sending thumb drives to Canada doesn't help. Like, you couldn't just upload files into the bucket." One real kick in the teeth came after switching the backend to Amazon Web Services S3. AWS was the initial pick because it was obvious that if something didn't happen fast, the site would die, and AWS was the easiest initial choice. Discord staff set up the S3 bucket and had to walk and see through the changes that needed to be made to the backend. To help reduce the financial burden on Nightcrawler, Discord staff gladly offered to pay the S3 bill to the tune of $200 or so per month. After some further research, it became apparent that Discord staff could save a significant amount of money by changing S3 providers. So let's kind of pause for a second. These Discord people help transition things to Amazon Web Services. And then a little while later, they decided, wait, actually, let's go with a different S3 provider. We can get it even cheaper. I can kind of see how Nightcrawler can sort of be frustrated by all of this. Like, you're telling me to do one thing, and then a month later, you're telling me to do another thing. But back to the response here. The new bucket was set up, but when the time came to make the change, Nightcrawler refused to do it, even though he was not the one footing the bill. Staff grew increasingly frustrated. Days would pass without a response from Nightcrawler. He refused to join the Discord to talk about solutions in real time. Did we vent in private about Nightcrawler? Sure. Did we dox or threaten Nightcrawler? He says, effing hell no. And frankly, I'm livid at even the suggestion we did. So yeah, more for RHDN, RomHackingDotNet, but this was not the outcome anyone wanted, and Nightcrawler is not the victim here. So I don't know, who do you believe? I mean, I'm not super, involved in this community. If I had to guess, it's probably a little bit of both are true. But yeah, it's kind of sad that petty internet drama took down one of the most important retro game websites out there. So pour one out for RHDN. Our final story is about Ready at Dawn. So Ready at Dawn has unceremoniously been shuttered by its owner, Meta, aka Facebook. So founded in 2003, Ready at Dawn would go on to form a close partnership with Sony Computer Entertainment, aka PlayStation. With PlayStation, they developed games such as Daxter for the PSP, God of War, Chains of Olympus, and God of War, Ghost of Sparta, also for the PSP. They would later port Ghost of Sparta and Chains of Olympus to PS3. That's where I played them. Fantastic God of War games, by the way. They are just totally focused on the fun of God of War. They don't have any other kind of stuff holding it back while you're playing it. It's just non-stop, roller coaster fun. I mean, I'm kind of sad I missed out on them when they were on PSP, but I enjoyed my time with them on PS3 greatly, back in 2012 or 13 or something, whenever that was. And finally, they developed the Order 1886, and this was an early PlayStation 4 game, $60 game, huge production values, but the game was really, really short. We're talking a 4 or 5 hour game, and reviewers and gamers who shelled out $60 were really critical of this fact, and it kind of hurt the game in a big way. I remember being really excited for this game, and then back then I used to be a little more I was working at a retail job for minimum wage or close to it, and if a game was going to cost me $60, I expected to play it for more than 4 or 5 hours. Now, what's funny is that now I probably feel sort of the opposite, where I'd be glad to pay for a game that was short, sweet, concise, and, was just a, roller coaster experience from beginning till end without a bunch of bloat. And that game was The Order 1886, ahead of its time in a lot of ways. Very cinematic. People still praise its graphics today for being like really, really next gen. It still looks really great today. It's playable on PS5 via backwards compatibility. And I hear it's actually a very quick platinum trophy too, if you kind of go through with a little bit of a collectible guide. It's one of those games that I've kind of wanting to been getting around to. I ended up picking up the game years later down the line, like dirt cheap on sale. So yeah, maybe I should put my money where my mouth is, so to say, and actually get to it. But yeah, so the game kind of flopped, and Sony was sort of like, I don't know exactly what happened, but they stopped working together after that. So they were cut loose, and they started work on a cartoony action brawler called Deformers, which would go on to be published by GameStop's publishing arm at the time, which was called Game Trust. I don't know how many games Game Trust put out, but it was a really small handful. I think Deformers, you could only buy it at GameStop, and I don't think they sold a physical copy. I think it was literally just like a digital code that you could get printed at the store. I don't know if there was some kind of, I feel like I remember some kind of bonus where if you got it at the store. But yeah, you could also buy it off the various digital storefronts. But this was like an online only multiplayer game. And just 16 months after the game launched, Ready at Dawn would shut the servers down at in August of 2018. So it was around this time that Facebook was really looking to ramp up their VR segment, which was known at the time as Oculus. And in order to do this, they would need studios producing games specifically for their headset. So they contracted Ready at Dawn a little while earlier to work on a game called Lone Echo. This is a VR adventure game. It ended up being quite the hit for the studio. Critically, the critics loved it, and the players really took to it as well. In 2020, Facebook formally acquired the studio. Like, they now owned Ready at Dawn. They were no longer independent. And a year later, Lone Echo 2 was released. A bit more of a tepid response to this one, but it's still enjoyed by a lot of people. And, players, we're looking forward to more games from Ready at Dawn. Specifically VR games, because that's now what the studio had just transitioned fully to doing. And they're not the only studio that got this billing, so to say. Sanzaru Games, who also used to work with Sony, they made the final Sly Cooper game, Thieves in Time. They were later also acquired by Facebook to make VR exclusive games, and they're still working on that. They're still making VR games for Facebook, or Meta as they're now known, and so they haven't gotten the axe, but Ready at Dawn they have. So 2023, news broke that the studio would be letting go of a third of their staff. This was last fall, I believe. And now 3 years later, after Lone Echo 2, the studio is no more. So for 3 years, no new games had been produced at Ready at Dawn. Android Central, interestingly enough, kind of broke the news on this and reports that according to a Meta spokesperson, the cuts weren't being made to save money per se. Rather, these cuts are being made to ensure that Reality Labs, which is basically the name for Meta's VR/XR division, stays within the new budgetary constraints, and that Oculus Studios can make a better long-term impact in VR development. Meta is apparently encouraging Ready at Dawn developers to apply to other jobs available within the company. But otherwise, that's a wrap on Ready at Dawn. Thanks, Zuck. End transmission.